The final BWI Live recruiting show of July, and the dead period training camp starts next week. And of course, that means, Ryan, this is your final show for a couple weeks, right? You're going on vacation next couple of weeks?
Yeah, we're hitting the road, going down to the beach for 10 days or so. So I will just miss you guys. I will be leaving next Wednesday, and I won't be back for the following week. But yeah, man, first off, the dead period still goes through August, unfortunately, but we got high school football and lots to preview then. So it will certainly be, much more to talk about, mid-August or so. But there's still a lot to discuss. I mean, we've been going through. I mean, you did a good job, I thought, with grades the other day. That's a lot of fun topics we can get into here on the show today. And I've really been working on Penn State's 2028 board, trying to set up, the guys that I think we need to be watching for evals mainly more than anything, right? Because as we've talked about a million times, that the guys at the top of the board now, the guys at the top of the board now usually stay there. It's kind of that middle tier, right, where you're going to see a lot of fluctuation and players who we're really not even talking about at the moment that probably end up in the class, honestly, and that happens everywhere. So we have plenty to discuss today.
Junior season is when all of the separation happens, and I get the sense that they put a lot of emphasis on game film, like guys playing really well. Obviously, this is always the thing. You have to have both, right? You have to have the size, you have to have the measurables, but you also have to have the game film, and they seem to put a lot of emphasis on that game film, which is coming out during the junior season, which has always been the most important when we talk about recruiting rankings and classes and all of those things. It's kind of the separation year for a lot of young players as they're developing. So getting the first read on 2028, we're doing that today. Also, as Ryan mentioned, after our conversation last week, I'm going to set up today's show. I talked about it on Tuesday with Fitz because I knew he wasn't going to be here today. But you and I last week, we had a conversation, and I thought a frank and honest conversation about Penn State recruiting and the situation that they were in. And there's been this kind of conversation in the replies, in the chat, that we are either being too nice because Penn State's class is ranked 21st overall, and I'm just going to talk for me personally, or we're deflecting on some of these conversations because how could 21 be good? So I went through. I took that to heart, and David K., I read his message on Tuesday that I thought was a fair nutshelling of like how maybe the miscommunication here between me and how I've been talking about these things, watching the film, and then everyone else's perception who follows the show and, is unhappy with where things stand. So that's how all this happened, is that, the feedback from you led to content on the site, which led to content on today's show, which is why we're going to be looking at the class position by position. And I think that will better explain some of the things that I'm trying to say. And then we can get into some of the details about like how they're building the class here to start the show, because Matt Campbell talked about that Tuesday at Big Ten Media Days, and I know you wrote about that yesterday. So that's where we're going to start the show, is kind of that initial salvo of what Matt Campbell had to say about everything he's done so far. So I have the clip to play here, but can you just kind of set up what you wrote about?
Yeah, I mean, basically just kind of took his comments and provide some perspective on, while I believe they are handling it the right way, they're just, what's the best word? They're still behind though when it comes to talent, right? And it depends on the standard you're holding them to. Like, how about you play the clip and let's get into it, because there's a couple ways to break it down. I think we just talk about what he said, I completely agree with for the most part. And we'll just kind of dissect it a little bit on the standards and what fans expect, right? And there's levels to that. But I think the best way to do it is play the clip.
So it's about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and I have a policy that I don't play anything over about a minute 15. So here's the first minute 4 seconds of what he had to say when asked about the class of 2020.
I would just say holistically, and I think maybe the question, and maybe you were there in the spring or not, and my response was, we're going to take it slow and right. And I think the biggest mistake that we can make, because we're still playing catch up in this class, right? You're playing catch up in relationships, playing catch up in evaluation, and the biggest mistake we can make is taking the wrong fit characteristically, taking the wrong fit, and this player doesn't fit our system. And so I think that when you only have 105 men on your roster, man, aligning the football roster and finding the right fit is critically important. And I would say probably there is a general sense of confidence that we trust our evaluation, we trust our process of building team, and we're, I think, really confident about where that high school class is as we kind of head into the fall. And I think we're going to learn a lot more about our own roster, to be quite honest with you, as we get into the fall for that 27 team.
So he talked a little bit more about the 2017, which you outlined in your article. So just take us through his comments there and what stood out to you.
Slow and right to start it off, right? That is what we have seen. They have been finding guys that have fit their mold going back through a decade now, to their time at Iowa State. I think a lot, we're going to get into kind of grades and, how we look at those guys. And truthfully, our next segment, I think, kind of helps explain it a little bit more. At the same time, there is a different standard at Penn State than you would have at Iowa State. And finding that combination is what I truly believe you're going to see more come 28 when they have those relationships a little more established. And that's kind of what he's getting at. They are playing catch up, no doubt about it. At the same time, the three schools they recruit against the most, right? I don't know if fans would agree with this. I think when I look at their primary recruiting rivals over the last decade, I would say Ohio State. Go ahead.
Can I guess? Ohio State, Notre Dame, and is it Michigan? Okay. My brain was like, you want to be tricky and say Clemson, but no, it's Michigan.
And so all three of those schools right now have doubled the amount of blue chip prospects. And I understand that's a subjective way to look at it, right? What is a blue chip prospect? I'm sure some of Penn State's lower ranked guys are going to look way more blue chip-esque in a year or two now, but we're not in a year or two from now. We're where we are at the moment. And so it's that balance. And so I like what they have done in a lot of ways, but there have been misses too. And so finding, I think the best way to say it is learn from your mistakes. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment when it comes to what I believe has happened over the last 7-8 months. I believe they are learning from those mistakes. And I'll really kind of get into that when we start previewing 2028 more. I've had multiple conversations over last week to try and start setting up these 28 boards. And that's a topic for another day. We'll get into that soon enough. I do believe the way they are handling 28, wide receiver, a couple other positions, tells me that they have learned a little bit on the whole Penn State is a national brand, yes, but Penn State doesn't always have that cachet on the recruiting trail. And I think they've learned that in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's what you're trying to say. That was the perfect way to say it, is like they thought getting to Penn State, and this is what I'm surmising from you have said, they thought getting to Penn State meant the end of what they were dealing with at Iowa State, in large aspect of, we now have this brand, and this brand means that we're going to recruit a guy, and if we recruit a guy and we want him and we are intentional with money and everything else, we get him. And that has not been the case at Penn State with James Franklin in the last 3 years, or with this current 2027 roster of players. So with 28, let me just ask you this, because this is what I wrote about last Friday, was like, if you're looking for money to solve this problem, you're looking in the wrong place. And it has to be, as you pointed out, and I just basically stole your point, win on the field and restore your credibility to the brand with an exciting style of football that gets people excited. And I probably left that part out, which is critical to high school kids, is be exciting. This show, I think we do a great job of giving you information. My job is to be entertaining. To make sure people want to watch this show is how you actually succeed. And so that has been something that I think has frustrated Penn State fans over the last couple of years. The rot with the James Franklin 10-2 was that you felt like you knew how it was going to go. There was no excitement there's no unpredictability. And so they have to provide that this year. That's what's going to close the gap. Not do they have the amenities and do they have the dollar figures to close the extra $100,000 in a situation. Do you think that's what they've learned, or what they're trying to accomplish in 28? Is those relationships are part of it, and then kind of the success is going to build the brand?
Well, just look at the transfer portal, right? I mean, they built a roster for 26 as much as 27 in my eyes. And that's kind of what Campbell was getting at the end, because they have a lot to learn still. You only have 15 practices, and those 15 practices were, in the spring, were largely obviously getting ready for the season, yes, to some degree, but bringing in some ways two teams together, right? With so many imports from Iowa State, you really kind of had to build your locker room up during those practices as much as you're getting ready. So I feel like they have a good understanding of 26 what they want, but yeah, moving forward 27, 28, how those younger guys progress and advance through these upcoming couple of months will really help them a ton at figuring out
Yeah.
what they need to prioritize moving forward. So, but again, the main thing though I would just stress is that they're not that far off from what we've seen before. And to be fair as well, 23 is kind of the year I always look at as like when NIL really got going. And
Hmm.
Penn State, sure, they've always been behind, and they're certainly still behind. But as it has now gotten to the point where we're talking 40, $50 million rosters, that has made it even a little bit more difficult in this situation, especially actually in this situation, because
Hmm.
you didn't have the relationships. And oh, by the way, you're in my opinion, they're probably in the mid 30s somewhere, right? So they are a good bit behind, and you could only splash in so many areas. And oh, by the way, they had to, I'm sure they had to splash a little more in some areas in the portal than they would have preferred as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like we were saying last week, the winning thing isn't going to make Penn State a national title contender all of a sudden, right? They're not going to have a 10-2 kind of season and then build a top 10 class next year. I don't expect that to happen, just because, again, there is a massive financial gap, and that makes top 10 classes kind of hard. But if you do put the wins back together, you do get the region, the coaches, the players, and everybody buying back into Penn State. Well, that's how you kind of can find some other guys that you can pluck. And yeah, I think they're not that far off from 15, 16 where we've always seen. And even like you look at the Big Ten rankings, they're at 8th right now. But if you look at the actual class numbers and the decimals they're behind, it's really not that much from Washington and Nebraska and UCLA. They're all kind of jumbled together. Now there is a big
Right.
gap, in my opinion, from Michigan and upwards, right, with Ohio
Yeah.
State, USC, and Oregon. And we saw that a decent amount over the last couple of years. I wouldn't say the Michigan gap was as big as it is now, but that can still
So
be.
that's the one I would say that probably feels the most galling for Penn State fans, is the fact that Michigan did the exact same thing. In fact, they fired their coach way later, and part of that is the class was locked in, right? So like they could have transferred, they didn't. One of them, Peter Bork, a quarterback that doesn't fit Kyle Whittingham, decided to leave the program. But beyond that, it feels like a lot of the players that they were recruiting stayed committed to the program for 26. And it doesn't seem like they have missed a step, where Penn State feels like they have missed a step. And I'm just curious, if I know you don't cover Michigan, but like that does seem to be what's the excuse for Penn State here? Because come on, like, Michigan's a Big Ten rival. You just mentioned they're a school that Penn State competes with directly for commitments. So what is it, money that's the difference there? Does Michigan just have more money?
Michigan's just had a national championship a couple of years ago too. Let's not forget that as well. And it's a brand name with more money. Yes, that's all true. Whittingham's a quality coach. Not that Matt Campbell's not. I think they're both very good coaches. But it's not like Michigan's coming off a disaster of a season. Penn State's coming off a disaster of a season, and that is a big difference. The way the programs are perceived are just different. Yeah, people expect Michigan to still be good. They had a bad situation with the head coach, got rid of that, have another good staff in there. Penn State's very similar in a lot of ways, but they also went from being a national title contender to barely making a bowl game. So that's the big difference there. And it comes back to, again, let's see them put the results together on the field and get people excited in the end. And I think Penn State will be fine long term. There is a little bit of part of me that worries a little bit about the talent gap when you add 26 and 27 classes, right? Because the 26 class, sure, there's some talent there, but it's not up to they lost it
was 15
talent
commits,
than they added,
right? So like they were down 10, just from a numbers perspective. Then of course, like, what were you putting together versus what you would wanted to have put together? Like there's a huge difference there. Yeah.
And I still believe that, this transition was hectic. The ins and outs were unlike anything we've seen, and that's still going to take probably a bigger portal year than what most fans, obviously not like last year, but prior years we're used to seeing. I would still expect another decent portal year coming up. So there's a lot of ways to fix these things. I have confidence in their ability to build relationships and all that. I feel good about the future. The main thing is show me how you learned from those 7-8 months. And I think they are fully aware of, the Jameer Deans and the Deshaun Halls and how they lost some guys and, the money kind of, you start here and maybe you should have waited a little bit longer to kind of get into some of these money topics because I'm not saying they bid against themselves. They know what they're doing with that stuff, but it just happens in every case of the way. So yeah, I still think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. Go out and win this year. The 28 class is off to a great start. There's a lot of positives. It just was a slower start than I think fans would want to see, but at the same time, it's all about perspective, and I kind of expected some of that to some degree. Maybe there's you can find a way or two where sure they slipped there here or there, but if you ever expected them to come in and just clean up, it was unrealistic.
So we can move on. I guess the last thing that I think is interesting is, and you've mentioned this with the portal, but also I think Matt Campbell admitted they're learning the players they have on the roster currently. Like they have put together 2 teams, and they feel like they went out and they chose all these players. So they feel like they know what those guys can do, but to actually work with them and know what they can do is different than actually, if you had been in a position for 3 or 4 years and you know everything about every player on your roster. I guess it was interesting to hear him admit, or at least, have the language of we're still learning about some, this roster and where we're going to have holes next year based on, I'm assuming, not just who graduates, but also who doesn't work out the way we expected. And having money for the portal, I think Penn State fans should be happy about that. Like the foresight to know you don't know everything, that the self-awareness of the evaluation process and leave yourself the ability to fix things at the last possible opportunity for next year, where you don't lock yourself in with freshmen or with too much on the front end for 2026. So I thought that was an encouraging thing for Penn State fans to hear, and I don't know that everyone would have heard it that way.
Yeah, he's talking all about underclassmen with that for the most part, and just kind of having a better understanding of like, okay, player X, Y, and Z, you look great in the weight room, you look great all summer, you're getting pushed around right now. Like that. That's. But also, there's going to be a few guys that you put the pads on, and it's like, oh, this is a different player than what we kind of expected, and maybe not someone who's going to instantly impact the wide receiver room or whatever it may be this year, but certainly get out there on special teams, work their way in, and by 27 could really do something. So they got to sort that out, and that's what every new staff goes through. James Franklin's doing the same thing at Virginia Tech. Kyle Whittingham's going to have to do the same thing at Michigan. You have a solid understanding of the team you have now, but it really takes preseason practice and into September and scout teams and all that kind of stuff to really understand the depth of your roster and where those holes are and where those surprises are as well.
So let's talk about the class of 2027. And here's how this is going to work. I have watched the film of the players that Penn State has committed in the program, which is my bias, right? Where I'll admit this, like, there's just not enough time in my schedule for me to watch every single player, especially ones that are not going to be part of Penn State's schedule or part of Penn State's recruiting, given what Ryan and Fitz report. So I challenged myself to go back and look at the names, look at the recruits that were realistic so that you could paint the relief picture, right? Because I like the players they've gotten. There are very few players on this roster that I question, are they good enough, or do they have critical flaws that are going to make them unviable at the next level? There's very few that I've seen that make me feel that way, especially from a football perspective. But there is the comparison of what didn't they get. And so this is where I was working with Ryan and Fitz on this article. And so I'm just going to throw up a couple of my grades, and we're going to react to these positions. Offensively, just a big picture. I think offensively is where this class kind of falls apart, Ryan. Looking through the positions, losing Aiden Gibson, and I guess we can just start with that while I talk about kind of the big picture thing. I gave running back a B-. There were 3 top guys for the class of 2027, as you have outlined in that top tier. They went after Aiden Gibson, and I'm going to put some words in your mouth because it felt like he was the guy that was most ready to go, right? So go with the guy that you feel like is going to be the answer, like instead of trying to get whatever guy you think in that group is the best. If you have them all rated similarly and Aiden Gibson wants to commit, okay, Aiden Gibson's the answer. He flips. And so I can't give this better than a B-, even though I really like Chu Odo and I think he's super talented and all the pieces are there. You've talked about him as a breakout candidate. If you lose your top option and you wanted to take 2 and you only have 1, even if that 1 is really good, I don't think you can do better than a B minus, but also the evaluation of Chuodo, I think, was a really great one by them. So I guess when you look at this and you factor in Keemon's spell, which is going to be what everyone who's the most angry in the chat and the most angry in the replies and the most angry on social media is going to throw that back in everyone's face, talking about like, hey, Chuodo's really good. And it's like, well, Keemon's spell. So it's already an F. I literally had somebody say that to me in the chat over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You didn't get Keemon's spell. It's an F. What do you see in this particular, what's fair and unfair about the grade and the running back recruiting for Matt Campbell through 27?
So I put kind of my own grades together, right? We talked about this morning, and I was kind of, all right, how would I look at it? And mine is more so the whole picture of how things played out more than just the film analysis part. Like, I don't know, did you lean more so in just like, this is their film, this is what I like, or you're saying,
did they get a good player?
Both. Okay.
So I wanted to say, did they get a good player? And then the challenge for me was, okay, what did they miss on? What did they miss on? And were there guys that were tangible? Were there tangible options that were realistic, that are better than what they have, that they missed on? And that was the part where I wanted to make sure that I was being fair, because the guys, I'm leaning on Chuodo's a good running back. I like him. But they did lose their top running back target, and they didn't get Keemon's spell. And so I guess that's where I'm trying to fold in all of this stuff.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that it's not Penn State's fault that Aiden Gibson had a fallout with his high school and things snowballed. Let's keep that in mind. Because that's something you can't see coming. And it's not their fault that down in where was Gibson? Gibson, Georgia, South Carolina?
South Carolina.
It's not his fault that the state doesn't really allow guys to move like that this late. There's transfer rules against that. So I gave the grade as a C. I like Chuodo a lot. I wrote about him as a breakout player. I believe a lot there. Where I am a little low on it, though, was the backup options and the options you did have. And so this is me watching Penn State recruiting for 15 years, and this is a great example of how I do believe they're learning from things where they won heavy outside the region. Trey Segar, right? Another guy there. Gary Walker, another guy down in Georgia. They really kind of went heavy down there. But they had also, in my opinion, a pretty decent option in the region. That was Dejon Talley Rhodes, who eventually goes to Indiana. Dejon Talley Rhodes, I thought, wanted to be at Penn State. I'm pretty confident saying that, at least at one point in the spring. Yes, the other three were higher on their board, and yes, it makes sense to push for the guys you believe in more. At the same time, by doing so, you also lost on a player that I would have as, high on that second B train, you know what I mean? On that tier, right? I mean, and so I look at that as a mistake from the perspective of the wide net. You have to keep all of these guys engaged. And Indiana went after him and got them and give them credit. Maybe that wouldn't have mattered. I just feel like from a more realistic perspective of what we've seen a lot from Penn State over the years, keeping it within the region, getting these guys on board, maybe a little earlier, maybe being a little aggressive here or there, allows you a little more freedom then to go for the Aiden Gibsons, to go for some of those other guys. And so maybe that's how they thought Chuodo was, right? And they did have Chuodo above Dejon Talley Rhodes. I'm not trying to pretend that he was in that same exact category, but he wasn't far off. I mean, he had a reason. There was a reason they sent an official visit with him. He fits their running style, bigger back. There's a lot of things they like there. And so that's why I for running back specifically, it's about keeping that net wide, making sure those kids in the region still feel very engaged, whether they're a plan B prospect or not, because you don't know how the cards are going to fall. And in this situation, the cards fell, and it really isn't their fault. It's not. They did everything right. They got a very talented back. The kid had a falling out. Rutgers seized on it, and Rutgers has done a fantastic job of getting guys in early. That I've talked about that a few times now recently. Rutgers did it with another kid too, one of the old linemen. They have him reclassifying too. So it's an unfortunate situation from that perspective. But let's also keep in mind they did some great scouting. They did some great recruiting. There's a lot of positives there. They only mean so much when you don't finish it out, though. So
I liked all of the. Sorry, I had myself muted while I was reading the chat. I liked all the backs that they had in the top tier. I thought they, if you were asking me, Trey Segar and Gary Walker were better than Aiden Gibson because they were
absolutely
faster. Yeah, but
I like Trey Segar a lot. I mean, Trey Segar would have been my one. no doubt.
Yes.
And I think
Same.
actually that is the truth for Penn State as well. I do believe
Yeah.
if they could just pick anyone, it would have been him. But they got in a little late with him too, and you know, there are different
Yeah.
things there. But I don't find fault in the way they played. I don't find fault in who they took and when they took and how it happened.
Yeah.
The thing is learn
So
from
are
that
you
and
saying,
just understand you got to keep the region healthy. And so I don't go ahead.
Let me put it this way then. If you were stacking the board, would you have bumped Dejan Telly-Rhodes into that top category because of the regionality fit? Even if talent-wise he was not in that tier, would you have put him up there and prioritized him that way so that eventually you might have ended up with him and Chu Odo?
So, I mean, he committed to Indiana on like June 3rd. So it was pretty early. Penn State scrubbed his official visit. And I just thought he was a player that you want to keep coming. And just drag it out as long as you could, where I just thought like they maybe kind of canceled that a little earlier than they should have. And again, it's all Monday morning quarterback. Like if you take me back to what, mid or early May, like I understand a lot of what they were thinking there. We've also just seen this play out a lot over the years where the further you are from State College, oftentimes shit happens. And so this is kind of one of those examples. This one's not really their fault, where another schools kind of pull away. It's more so the player initiated it. And give Rutgers credit, they have found ways to get guys in easier than Penn State has, especially reclassifying and all those things. And they seized it. And so it's a tough situation to be in. They'll be okay at running back. Running back's never a position I ever worry about with Penn State. They'll be fine there. Just understanding how you got to play it, and that don't wrong. I'm not saying they don't. I just think learn from your mistakes there a little bit, and making sure you're keeping everybody engaged for as long as you possibly can.
So this is something in the chat that Douglas asks, T. Frank, how is 2028 going to get better? I think, Ryan, understanding the region and getting to know the players and the coaches and the systems and the places in the region that are important, this is an area where they can learn from that mistake, build those relationships, and do better in 2028, where you don't have these situations like receiver, which we'll get to later. But I feel like that's kind of what Ryan is saying here. Let's get to...
It depends on, just real quick, like it depends on what if you're expecting all this top 100 talent in 28, like, no, that's still a money issue. And that's going to be a money issue. I truly wholeheartedly believe that. But there's also, as we've talked about a million times, T. Frank, 150 to 400 range. You know, the 4 stars that are out there that are quality players, but, you know, maybe for one reason or another don't have these massive programs going after them. Those got to be your bread and butter. It is the reality of the situation. And I do believe 28 in the region sets up well for them to maximize that better than what they were able to do this year. And look, it's not their fault. They were so far behind where they started. So go ahead.
Yeah. So that is, I think, where the no nuance crowd is going to say does not matter. That doesn't matter when they're hired. That's kind of, and by the way, I know there's thousands of people that watch the show and thousands of people that listen to this show. And then there's dozens or hundreds of people that reply to the show, and that's who we have the conversation with. So I understand that it is not a sample size of people's actual opinions and feelings, but it is the one that we have to go with, and the selection bias there does have us have that conversation. So I know some people will chime in and say, like, just stop listening, but like, that is the reality we all live in the new social media online community world. Is if we are here trying to have this conversation, that is the beauty of what it's supposed to be. There is less interaction with people that are just less intense. Let's go to defensive tackle. Defensive tackle, I gave an A- because you don't get guys like Stanley Montgomery into the Penn State football program very often. And I think Andy Paiva is a really good fit for the system, even if a 3-star nose tackle is not going to get anybody excited in recruiting. Probably not going to get anybody excited in the recruiting world, because even when he wins with power, you know, watching him in drills this spring, he's kind of slapping dudes in the head. Like, he's so strong and he's so violent. He's swinging around, and like his hand usage needs to get more refined. But when he wins, he's just shoving guys over. Like, he's just dominating in a way that I don't think you're going to guys at the next level as often. And so, like, what he is he's going to be a dominant run defender in this system if everything works out for Andy Paiva. Stanley Montgomery, 6'3", 300 pounds, great athleticism, great upside and potential, top 100 defensive tackle. I have a hard time thinking that Marcus Fakatu or David Folorunshio were realistic options.
They weren't.
They visited, but so technically I put them on the list in the article. My quibble here is I really like Zamar Tukes, and he was the one where if I said, if you push for 3, this is an A+, and you have nailed it because Tukes is super talented. He's kind of the inverse to me of Elijah Gurton, of a guy that could maybe spend some time at 5 tech, but is a defensive tackle. And, that aspect of it, I think they could have used and would have been A+, would have been the best defensive tackle class we've seen from Penn State I don't even know when. I don't know the last time it was that good. So I went with A-. What did you go with?
B, and it's because of Tukes. And
Okay.
that was a player that I just thought at one point. No, look, Florida came in. Florida was aggressive. Like us, I don't know the financial aspects of it, so I don't want to. I don't want to be like, oh, Penn State, how'd you not get this guy? Because I don't know what that money was at the end to know maybe that's kind of what separated. But I know enough to say that there was certainly a point in time where all signs pointed to Penn State, and he wasn't that shy about saying Penn State's, the team there. So it's a hard one there because, again, I don't know the final results. And this is the thing that sucks about recruiting these days is usually you can kind of figure stuff out more where no one wants to talk about money. You can get some details out of it, but not really the finer details. I do believe Florida was a little more aggressive than Penn State at the end there. But at the same time, could that have been a recruitment where if you push a little harder in the beginning, you don't even, get them going down to Florida and looking at it a little bit. So It's hard to say. We're all Monday morning quarterback in here, and I don't want to be too hard on them. I like Paiva a lot. I like Montgomery a lot. I think they've done a good job there, especially, Malloy using his connections, out there in Utah and some of the other places out west. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And I like Paiva a lot. I think there's a lot to work with him. So that's exciting part of it. Let's see how they do moving forward. I still would be shocked if Penn State ever gets a kid from Hawaii. Although I was talking to somebody today about one of Malloy's top guys out in Hawaii. So anyway, it's a exciting class. I think both guys are good, but man, Rochester, New York, you have a really talented D tackle there, in my opinion, and it stinks missing out on them. So B for me on that one.
All right. I'm just so much nicer. This is why I'm not a teacher. Just
but it depends
super nice in grading.
I look because I've done, it's what, year 16 for me. So I'm just comparing what I've seen from Penn State over the years, right? And it's unbiased to some degree because it's really just the James Franklin era, right? You can't really include late Paterno and Bill O'Brien in that because of everything that happened. But I know what I've seen, and really I'm trying to grade it on more so what I've seen the last couple of years leading into this more than 16, 17, 18. It's just so different now.
Is Tukes a guy that you're interested in keeping an eye on late in this down the stretch? Given
Penn State should absolutely keep pursuing him. Okay. I don't.
Florida's not like gonna set the world on fire, and like that's a tenuous situation with that program.
I like what Florida's building. I will say that. I do like Alex. I think that there's reason to feel good, but who knows? We've said that about 3 or 4 Florida coaches by now, I feel like. So it's hard to know.
My bad. I was thinking of Florida State with Billy Napier, not with Florida. Yeah, that's my bad. I was thinking the coach was on the hot seat. They just got a new coach, so no, there's much less of an opportunity there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So let's get to rip the Band-Aid off on this one. I didn't want to go offense, but we do have to talk about receiver, so I threw in defensive tackle there. I just don't see any way that this is anything other than an F for receiver. You have one, and a guy that I think is good, but cannot carry a class. And the fact that they had 4 committed at one point, according to you and Fitz, and they come away with 1. If they had come away with Jameer Dean and Landon Bloom, I would have been super happy with this class. If they had come away with Bloom and Hall, less so. Khalil Taylor, I think, would have been, if you lose Dean, a really good consolation prize. But you get none of them. And to have just one guy who is an X and doesn't have like the most complete profile as a speed guy, I think they're right back to where they were previously of a guy that fits into one position. It's just on the opposite side of the formation where he is an X and he's not really going to be a Z and he's not going to be a slot guy. And the flexibility of what they are building with, even if they find somebody late in the process, is just limited. And I've seen, this is where I've seen too much of this with the recruiting previously. If you start recruiting a type and suddenly you don't have the flexibility to play guys across different positions, and you put guys in position where they're not doing the best thing that they can do. I don't like that. And so, like, I went with an F here because of what they had committed, what they had in the door overall, and what they ended up with. What do you have?
C. Incomplete is basically what I really should give. Now, here's why, D. Frank.
Okay.
We'll go incomplete for now. There's been a lot.
I feel better that I have one grade that's lower than you because I've been too nice so far.
It comes back to, that the end results sucked in those situations. Learn from them. You're going for a kid from Alabama. Auburn is aggressive financially. Learn from that. You went from a kid from Tennessee. You did all the scouting. You did everything right. Georgia came calling. Georgia used your scouting, not use your scouting report, but use the information that they had, did their own scouting, and said, "Oh, wait a minute, this guy's pretty good." Learn from that, and I think they will. They have to. Khalil Taylor, I wrote the other day, I felt like he was looking for a reason not to come to Penn State. And so
I don't consider him as part of this too. Like, I agree. To me, it's about Hall and Dean. And those are the ones when you have this situation that you had him committed, and like, I would be fighting like hell to keep Jameer Dean in the class. To like, this is also the problem.
But they're going against Georgia.
I know.
But Georgia's got 7-8 years now of pretty good, excellent, pretty good, excellent, pretty good.
Yeah.
And Penn State has a lot of pretty good years in there too, but they're coming off a year that was, they were supposed to be a national title contender, guys. And look what happened. So it's just, man, it hurts. It hurts a lot. But that's not why they lost Jameer Dean. They lost Jameer Dean because he's an SEC kind of, Tennessee, Georgia. It adds up. My point here, though, T. Frank, is let's give credit where credit's due for scouting. I don't want people to be out on Kashif Moore and the scouting staff and all, because they've done a pretty damn good job. Just learn from those mistakes. Understand the situation you're in. They understand now fully. They understand the situation they are financially. If you're going to be going against these schools, understand that you're going to need some plan Bs and that and so forth. And we're about to find out whether they're able to continue that, whether they're able to flip guys. I have a lot of faith in the scouting, what I've seen at that position.
So can I just jump in here? Because that's also where my grade is influenced, because I was so excited about this receiving class and then so disappointed in the evaluation, and not as obviously not as a fan, but as somebody who likes receivers. Like, it's my favorite position. I love big plays. Like, receiver is awesome. And Jameer Dean is one of the best I've seen from high school, and I was so excited. And so maybe this is an emotional bias here of just like, nothing is going to replace that. Nothing will be able to replace that in the class.
That's not true. That's not true.
I know it's not true, but that's the emotional feeling. That is the emotional feeling I'm coming from. Like, well, it's not Jameer Dean, so I'm not going to be satisfied. And I know that, like, you're right. That is an absolute bias here that I need to acknowledge. And so the incomplete grade, I think, is fair.
Absolutely. I mean, again, Jameer Dean was recruited by UConn.
Fools.
It was Arkansas. Like,
we're all they're fools.
Okay, but there's why is there not another? There is. I know there's got to be guys out there that are going to this school or that school or whatever. Go find them. You showed me already. You showed all of us that you can scout talent.
Yes.
We saw that in multiple positions, not just wide receiver, but we've seen enough of that I have belief that in 4 months they can do that. Now, they got to just do it. That's all. And so that's why it's incomplete for me. I'll say average, whatever. I like Landon Bloom. I think he's a good player. The guys they had in that mix, I was impressed with. Yes, it didn't work out. That's what happens sometimes when you're going for guys down south trying to pull away. When Auburn's saying, "Hey, well, here, we'll throw you some extra money and take this Hellcat over here." By the way, so like that's how it works.
Yeah,
that they've learned that now. That's how Penn State is high up on that board, but they're just a little tick below some others when it comes to aggressiveness and all those kind of things. Not aggressiveness, but just being able to splash on recruits. And so show me that. Go find that kid who's committed to some Big 12 school right now that we're not talking about. And then we're going to put on the film. We're going to say, oh, he's pretty good. And then we're going to find some track numbers and say, oh, man, 10-8, not bad. That kid is out there somewhere. Go find him.
Yep. Yeah. And so we agree by the way. Like, I'm in the same exact spot. And that's why I was so, like, again, that was the excitement of, like, they just found this dude who might be the best receiver in this class. And then having to do that again feels like, man, if they can If they can do that, like holy cow, they can find another player like that. That would be impressive. So let's get to the offensive line. And again, that is also why when we talk about Matt Campbell recruiting and the ability to identify talent, why I think the three of us are talking very differently about the class of 2027 than fans who are seeing that number, which is, again, why we're going through this. By the way, like the video, subscribe here to the YouTube channel if you're enjoying this conversation. The deep dive into the nitty-gritty of what makes up that 21st overall ranking and where we have landed on some of these things. Offensive line, I think, is another one that is polarizing, given Maxwell Hiller and Olubaboa being in the region, 5-star tackles that went elsewhere, or 5-star offensive linemen. What's that?
Leighton Von Brandt.
Leighton Von Brandt, yeah. I went with a B+. I think that there's a good blend here of incredible upside and also high floor projectability to the next level. John Sasek playing guard, I love that. I was concerned they were going to see him as a tackle. I think they have a clear-eyed view of what does and doesn't play at this level on the outside. David Tarawale is the Jameer Dean of the tackle position. And so they hit it out of the park at 3 different high-value positions. They got 2 of 3. That's pretty good when it comes to this evaluation that you're talking about, being able to evaluate and find talent. And then Ryan Robbins, I feel like maybe he was banged up last year, and there's a little bit of more to come from him. So I'm still TBD on him. But he's one that I'm not as high on. But I want to be fair to give him a senior year of evaluation. And there's stuff even on film where he is nasty, physical, and explosive off the line of scrimmage. It's just his move in open space, but he's an offensive lineman. Not everyone has to move in space like a tight end. So I went with a B+. I think they didn't miss anywhere in terms of there's no hole here that I go, ooh. But a guy like Lucas Roja, Carter Jones, if you were to fill in one of those guys, Davis Seaman, some of the guys that you brought to my attention kind of in the recruiting process, I think that would have made it, in the A's. So where did you go with this, given all of
B. And what's funny though is I'm a B for a lot of the reasons you're a B+. Or no, the opposite. Actually, let me clarify.
Okay.
I love Ryan Robbins. Go watch his basketball film. I love his ability to just kind of use his body well. It's different. It's more so jumping and moving and how he does on basketball that excites me. And I agree with you. There's more to come there. I think, look, there's a reason Ohio State and some other big schools were very seriously interested in Ryan Robbins. Notre Dame was another one too down the stretch. They didn't quite get there, but he's not far off from that tier. And some schools believe. So I like that. I'm also a little opposite on David Tarawale. There's only 2 minutes and 30. There's 2 minutes 30 seconds film out there on him, and so I love what we see athletically. We have some numbers now. There's some data there that we love. Just be careful. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves there with David Tarawale. There's just I like a lot.
So this is the difference because going and watching his full game film and seeing how he plays offensive line, his technique is good for an offensive lineman in high school. Like he's reach blocking correctly. His hands are good. His kick slide is good. And again, like none of these things are college level, but like compared to his peers and other offensive linemen I've seen, it was literally just add water. It was just add weight. And I felt like there was something that could become exceptional because of the way he moved and the way he was positionally sound. And that's why I'm higher on him, because you're right, like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, he's obviously hiding a lot of plays that are not good enough. But when you watch the plays that weren't good enough, they weren't good enough for the obvious reason, which is he was 225 pounds.
That's true. I haven't watched that's true. There are full games
just
out there.
Don't do it to yourself.
We're a month out from high school football. And I love high school football, don't get me wrong, but like when you watch NFL and you watch college and then you go to all these high school games, it's kind of sometimes it's a little cumbersome. But
too much steak.
Owen Riley, I love Owen Riley's wrestling background. I think there's a lot to like there. And like I said, I'm really high on Ryan Robbins. I like John Sasek a lot. I'm really excited to watch that Central Catholic offensive line this year, which looks really good. By the way, there's another Central Catholic guy we're going to have to keep an eye on. We'll get into that down the road. I was talking to someone about that an hour ago. So yes, B+, that's all fine. Love David Tarawale. I just don't want to get I don't want fans to get this mindset of like, he's a guy that should be playing in a year and a half from now, because I do think there's going to take some time. And so that's kind of where I'm. I truthfully, I believe Ryan Robbins could end up being the best of the group, but what do I know, right? That's what we'll find out here in 2-3 years from now.
So let's get to safety, and this is I would say this is my incomplete grade. I probably should have
Yes,
gone
me
with
too.
just a
Me too.
C,
Me
but
too.
I went with a C minus. It should be just a C. This is a situation where I think they just kind of ran out of runway. Caleb Cooper, I know you talked to his coach. You got some of those numbers that are just eye-popping, right? The film says he doesn't know how to cover just yet. And also the context of he's young to the position. So it's a very boom or bust thing to me because sometimes coverage instincts just don't show up. And so he's as athletic as you could find. The only thing that I have as a problem is he's 5'11", and that's not a problem. Like, that's just a quirk. But Gabe Jenkins, Cooper unmocked. I think two of the guys that would have made this class a really, really strong class from a size, movement skill perspective, talent overall. Jenkins, that situation happens. You're going to have that. And then I think kind of what you said about running back, betting on a guy like Cooper Onmock from the Midwest, and then he decides not to come out to Penn State. And that was kind of like their last shot at a guy that I think would have completed this room. And now you've got Jonathan Gillette, who's an undersized box safety from the way he plays. You know, I think he can be a coverage player. And then Caleb Cooper, who is a fireplug box safety, who could be a guy that can cover. But I have two guys that I don't know if they can cover because they're not asked to do that a whole lot. And so, like, it's a C. Like, if I would redo this, I would just call it a C. I need to see some more from these guys in their senior seasons.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I really don't have much to say. I would just say incomplete from the perspective of I do not think Gabe Jenkins is completely done yet. I'm still very iffy on Colorado and the success they're going to have this year. And, you know, I don't know I know a decent amount of what's been promised to Gabe Jenkins. It's a lot. And in some ways, I think a little more bite off the apple than maybe Colorado could chew at some point. So we'll find out. But point being is I know they're not going to stop on Gabe Jenkins. Penn State's very still interested in him, and Colorado has to go out and prove it this year. And so just let's keep an eye on that situation, because if they are able to add Gabe Jenkins late, and I think it's just more, if there's one guy committed elsewhere right now out of this region, Gabe Jenkins is the one I'm watching the most. That would change my outlook a lot. The other thing I'll say is I have full faith in Deion Brumfield as a recruiter. I think he's going to be one of the better coaches. I think he's already one of the better recruiting coaches on this staff. What I've seen from them and the way he's attacking the 2028 board with Brandon Murphy and Girton and Geo McKnight and some of these guys, don't overthink it too much. I feel good about that situation moving forward. And so, yeah, let's just see if they're able to add somebody late there. But look, Caleb Cooper has some sensational numbers, like you said. It just comes down to coverage, right? And I agree with both of that with Gillette and Cooper.
And again, that is an amazing scouting job to find Caleb Cooper and to identify a guy with upside and reasonable upside. Like, not just a guy who can run fast, but a guy who has productivity and there is a fit for him in defensive football, even if he doesn't develop. And so, the areas we're talking about. The other thing is, like, I hear what you're saying, and I also don't want I don't want these to be a reflection on the coaches. This is just what the product, like just the players, the film, what I've seen. And I think it's good that you point that out, because I'm not saying that Deion Broomfield or Savon Huggins are B- recruiting coaches or any of those things. Like, I hope that does come across. And you're right. Like, we do have to caveat that because somebody will take it that way.
Yeah.
The other thing I
always try to do. I try to do that more than I probably should, but it just, I'd say this with message boards all the time. And I joke with my wife about this all the time. It's like, because I've been on message boards forever, anyone can write something and 7 people can read it 7 different ways. And so we'll be in group text with friends and stuff. And my wife will be like, oh, well, that seemed a little rude or whatever. I'm like, honey, you got to stop overthinking the text part. And I get that's a different subject what we have, but even when we're on here discussing things and we're not going through and answering every single question everybody has, people always just look at different things different ways. And so I always try to make sure that we're bringing counterpoints, right? That's the whole point of podcasts and shows like this.
The other thing is, like, these grades that I have done are where they are right now, because you have a clearer view of what the future is going to look like in terms of guys and positions they're going to go after. And I believe they're going to go after receivers, right? So I don't think their final grade is going to be an F.
No.
At the same time, like, I'm grading what I know, and what I know right now, that's kind of where I put it. So I think that's also an important thing to put out there in this context of this conversation. So where the positions, I guess, would it just be the positions that we have lower grades on that you think are guys that have positions that you think they're going to be the most aggressive with in the fall? Or is it just overall whatever's available, they're going to consider it?
Yeah, it's more that, honestly. We know wide receiver, right? Running back isn't necessarily a position where they absolutely 100% have to take another. If one emerges, they will. But I would say the same thing about a quality offensive tackle, or even a good defensive tackle, right? I don't know, safety in another spot, but I could really say that across the board in a lot of ways. Maybe I think linebacker they feel pretty good about with the two they have, but there's so many ways to look at it. They're not going to pass up on talent, especially again when you're coming off a 26 class that was kind of beat up and isn't to the size that you probably would have preferred, all those different things. So T-Fangs, truthfully, we were going to talk 28. If you wanted to go through some more of these and finish out the show on these, I feel like that's almost a better way to finish it, just because like we can talk 28 guys all we want, but we're gonna be talking 28 guys a lot when I get back from vacation. Like that's gonna be everything. And so in my opinion, like talking corners right now, talking linebackers, the positions we missed, like I feel like that's a almost more productive way to go.
Absolutely. It's all, well, here's the deal is like, you
didn't make graphics for all the other ones.
I didn't make graphics for all the other ones, but it's because like I didn't want my stuff to be the feature of the show and me to be sitting here asking questions and like having it all be about me. Like I like asking you.
I was going to text you today actually to say let's focus on this, but then we were going to do 28 last week breakdowns, and then we're going to do this week, and my point being is there's a lot of time to do that in August. Like for example, let's talk. Like what do you think? You gave tight ends an A, and that's interesting to me. I want to go through that with you. What is an A for you? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a D or something, but I'm just curious on why you have Cooper Terwilliger and Sean Curry as an A.
So again, I was trying to go with what was a realistic class, and what did they miss on, and how does it fit into the offense?
Right.
So Sean Curry, to me, is Ben Bramer 2.0. And so he fits into that position. I can see a direct correlation to how they will use him on the offense. And I think he, in some ways, as a blocker, shows promise, where I think Bramer still has been trying to work on that at this point in his career. Terwilliger was their top target, a long-time target. He's the guy I'm a little more concerned with because I do think, as you pointed out, I said like he's an Andrew Rappelier comparison, and you've said he's not as athletic, and that's absolutely right. That would be my concern. At the same time, his positional skills are awesome. Like watching this dude run over people and his play through contact and his receiving ability after the catch, I think are traits that are going to play. And so you don't always have to be a freak tight end. And that would be the area where I'd say they don't have a freak tight end in terms of height, weight, speed, but they do have two quality players that translate directly into the offense, and I know how they're going to use them. And then it becomes some of the other guys that they didn't get. I know they backed off on one of them, and the other two that they really wanted went to other schools. And I can see how just the numbers crunch of, okay, you've got your receiving tight end, so then Colt Lumpers is going to go to Michigan. I didn't penalize them for that miss as much, even though I know they want 3. So that's where I went with an A, because I feel like it was a complete class. You can get away. That is a good group that fits all your needs. Agreed. Really well.
Yep. Yeah, mine would just be a B. I would only give one. I went through all of them and gave my own grades, and now we got some time. Let's go through them. There was only one that I'll give an A. We'll get that in a second.
Okay.
They're just missing. I love athletes. I love Sadiq at tight end. Like those kind of freak athletes, and that's just kind of what they're missing here, right? But you bring up a good point of like
Nick Harbor.
Who did you miss that was like that? There really wasn't a whole lot of that in this cycle. At least
maybe Lumpris would be the only one, right? That kind of.
I mean, so Tommy Douglas is the one that interests me the most. We don't have. Tommy goes to the Hun school. His dad, of course, is GM of the Jet. Like he's very laid low, but from what I understand, he might be the best of all those guys, personally, just from the way people talk of him. But every time I try to get specific details, I can never really get it right. So I don't 100% know. Just kind of the vibe I've gotten from some is, Tommy Douglas. And Tommy Douglas was Florida, Penn State. And, at the end, he picked Florida. And that's a good pick from him. So that's all. I just was curious what made it an A for you. Because for me, the one group that's an A is linebacker. I love Case Alexander. I love Blake.
Yeah, I gave them an A+.
Right. And that's the one where I totally with agreement with you. we wrote about Case and talked about on the pod the other week. Polled everybody, right? Who's that guy that's going to come in here and live up to expectations and, be a 2-3 year starter, somebody who really contributes and has a successful career. Case Alexander was the one they met. Blake Betten is a very exciting player too. Like,
yep.
Blake Betten is committed to Penn State. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to scare people here, but like, I think that if there's not bigger schools, but some big time programs out there are going to try and poach someone, like they would go for a Blake Betten because there's a lot of measurables there. He's a safety. Like there's moves well. Dad's a coach. There's so many things there that would make sense. Now, don't get me wrong. At no point have I ever heard of it, Blake Betten being scared or anything. I'm just saying, like that's
the
when I look
profile.
up and down this class. Yes, when I look up and down this class, he makes sense for a Michigan to go after or a Notre Dame to go after. And again, I'm not trying to say that they're way above Penn State. I'm just saying right now, recruiting wise. Like he would be that. He would be one of those guys.
Yeah, and that's why I gave him an A+, because I don't think you could have done better. And so, like, let's just give the example of this is where we get the EST syndrome. It gets out of control. Case Alexander, let's talk about where he is. Like, he's like the 5th ranked linebacker or something like that. What separates him from number 1 is decimal points. Mm-hmm. And that's where, if you get into these conversations, he's the number 10 overall linebacker in the class of 2027, according to Rivals, according to our rankings. I have not watched all the other top 10 linebackers, but if you're saying that, okay, so size and speed are the things that are going to differentiate, because it's not on-field play, what he does on the field is exceptional. And he's big enough, but are you saying, like, faster guys or guys that are going to project to be 235, 240 pounds, and I think he can be 235, no problem, but is he going to run a 4.4? That's where we get into diminishing returns, where football matters more than whether you run a 4.6 or you run a 4.5, or if you run a 4.5 and you run a 4.4. Because we've seen these guys that run a 4.4 and they suck at linebacker. And you have a guy who's good at linebacker, and I have no questions about his coverage, his run fits, his instincts. It's one of the most instinctive positions where you have to have the cerebral and also the unconscious of, you just know what you see and you go attack it. And he's got both of those things. So, like, number 1, number 10, I don't care. You're not going to get better than Case Alexander unless there's guys out there that are just better at instinctively than him. And then at Blake Betten, I see the same way you do. If you wanted to say, like, if they wanted a third and Tyson Washington is that kind of old school Sam that could develop into a Caleb Bacon, I'd say that'd be the one thing if they don't have anyone that could be kind of that Sam. But who cares? They run a 4.25. That's kind of a unique position that they would have as kind of a sub package guy. So that's my rant on we need to stop obsessing about, once you get past the threshold of good enough, football does need to take priority.
This is random and doesn't matter a whole lot, but like, look at the 9 linebackers and where they went ahead of him. Texas A&M, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Miami, Clemson. That doesn't really fit the profile as well. Oregon, Ohio State, Auburn. These are all freak athletes who got paid a lot of money to go to big time schools like that. So when I look at that and then I see Case here, I'm thinking that is a great evaluation. You knew you could. I mean, obviously they were recruiting him well beyond there, so it's maybe not exactly oranges and oranges. But the point, though, is that they got the best player that they could realistically get without having to pay stupid money for. And that's an exciting sign. And by the way, Blake Betten, again, more of a safety, but he's going to play more lower linebacker this year. Like, love everything about Blake Betten and as far as what he could be leader on that defense moving forward. So that's my A. That is the without a doubt A.
So let's go to corner then, because I gave corner an A. I don't think the loss of, I liked Zachary Gleason. I don't think the loss of Zachary Gleason plus the addition of Dylan McGee does that. Like, I think you improved there overall. So I gave that an A. What did you give then? Where'd you go there?
Just A-, honestly. So actually, B+ is kind of where I ended. I'm just saying, like, that was my highest grade. I gave it a B+, truthfully. A-, B+, somewhere in that ballpark. It is certainly the second best position in this group. But I mean, again, you have one top 100 guy, and Karan Caesar is kind of the wild card. I wrote about him last week. There's a reason I think people need to be talking about him a lot more. I'm excited to watch his season. That's where maybe would keep it from being an A. Like, I feel more confident in Blake Betten and Case Alexander both being excellent and contributing and all those things, then I would say that Telfair, Caesar, McGee are all going to reach that too. And I get it, it's 3 versus 2, but
Yeah.
I feel good about the class. Don't get me wrong. Cornerback looks great.
McGee's coverage instincts are exceptional, and he's definitely fast. I guess my biggest concern is that he's tough, but I don't think he tackles very well. And I know that Terry Smith wants his guys to tackle. And even when he was healthy, I don't feel like he wrapped up or was kind of like a force. Telfair's kind of the same way. He's a smaller guy. He's 160 pounds at 6 foot. So that element is missing of like just the dominating size that Samaje Robinson brought to the table.
Mm-hmm.
But if Terry Smith feels like he can get these guys to tackle, I'm not going to question whether he can get those guys to tackle. And I think that the combination of their coverage skills is, again, this is the problem of like it's the 21st overall ranked class, but this cornerback room and this linebacker room are two of the best examples of like complete rooms that we've seen in recent memory. And I don't want to do best ever or any of those things because I don't actually remember all these details, but the feeling I remember, and the feeling coming away from this is that Keyshawn Telfair and Dylan McGee have the opportunity to be the best coverage duo that they've had. Like super talented cover corners. And I know McGee's a a 3-star, excuse me, but is a guy that Texas wanted and all these other schools were interested in. So that's why I feel like in the end, they got the best combination of guys, even if Robinson and Gleason decommitted. I really like this room. Another one, and I want to throw this one at you. Where did you land on edge rushers? Because I'm going to rely on you
Say
in
one,
terms
B+.
of what. Okay,
Same.
all right.
Yeah.
Because could they have gotten Abraham Cisse and Elijah Gurton? Because I know they really liked Gurton.
Cisse got priced out of their ballpark. It is what it is.
Okay. But like, okay, so if they had gone in all in, like everyone in chat wants them to go all in, right? It does not matter. The price does not matter. Go get the player, be the highest bid. If they had done that, is there any way they're getting Elijah Gurton?
Well, they were aggressive with Elijah Gurton. That's one thing I feel pretty confident saying that he was one of the guys where I don't know exactly what Florida was offering, but they didn't let it get to that point, if that makes sense, right? This was a guy that came on campus immediately. They loved him immediately. They knew they liked him a lot before, but they just wanted to get him on campus. I'm up, loved it, and aggressively pursued him from start to finish, if that makes sense. Aggressive in all ways. And so they didn't let it get to the point where a Florida would, have to splash here or there they set the number. I'm not going to say extremely high, but they went aggressive from the jump. And that's how it paid off. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess that's what I'm saying is like, I don't think they could have afforded to do the ultimate class, which would have been Gurton and Cisse. Like you have to make a choice there. And Gurton is a guy that has physical talent in the bucket of an Abraham Cisse. I'm not saying that he is the same thing, but if you're talking about are there things that make me concerned as to his ceiling? Not really. Because again, fast enough. Everyone thinks that 4.4 is fast enough. 4.6 gets you drafted in the top 10 of edge rushers at the NFL Combine. 4.6 and above. I think Elijah Gurton could run a 4.6 someday. And he's 250 pounds. He's 6'5". He's got massive wingspan. All the things you want out of a defensive end and a defensive end in the system that fits the scheme. If they had gotten both those guys, obviously it's an A+. So I was just curious of like the realism of some of these positions. And again, going back to offensive line, the realism of getting some of these guys, I don't think it was really there, even though I know Cisse was a guy they were after. They wanted really bad.
Carter Blattner is the biggest wild card in this class too. Actually, you could say Gurton and Blattner to some degree. But just because like how high Gurton's ceiling could be, but he also plays in Rhode Island, right? So you got to kind of keep that in perspective of what you're seeing at times. But Blattner's another one where it's like, man, if Blattner was not at Northern Highlands because he's in North Jersey, right? If he was at, I don't know, Paramus, DePaul, St. John's Regional, like if he was at some of those, Catholic schools that kind of run the area up there, I'd just be curious on how different his recruitment could have been because there's a lot to like there. They believe that he has a high ceiling. And we're going to learn a lot about him this year. So he was one of those guys that, I heard a lot about when I was kind of doing that exit interviews, we'll call them in late June, early July. I mean, I call him a wild card. We're going to find out a little bit about, we're going to find out a lot about him, but they do believe that there's a lot to work with there.
And this is again where I'm open to being wrong. His tape did not flash to me. Like
Yeah.
Gurton and he played the same position essentially. And I was just like blown away by Elijah Gurton's abilities when he got on the outside, his ability to dominate with violence and length on the interior. Carter Blattner didn't flash the same way. And so like I'm reserving that one. To me, that's why it's a B+, because I wasn't necessarily on the same page, but I'm not the expert here. I'm not the guy who knows all the things. So let's get to I think the one that you could have a whole show about, and we've had multiple shows about this, but the last one here, and I do want to get to it. Let's just finish it out. It's quarterback. To me, this was my incomplete, even though it is complete. Quarterback is so cerebral of a position. Like, between the ears matters so much. And Bork is obviously more talented. He's bigger. He's got a stronger arm. Athletically, he's not great, but he's not inept. Will Wood, it's just, do you believe in Will Wood? They do. And so I gave it a B. I can't give it an A+. I'm not bought in that he's going to like be able to throw a 15-yard out and is going to get there on time and it's going to be perfect in everything that he does. But like, there's a lot to like about him. And so like, I went with a B, and this would be one of the areas where you would be the most critical of Penn State, that they did not go get the top 10 quarterback. They did not spend. They did not aggressively beat James Franklin for Peter Bork. They decided they went for Will Wood. And my concern, and Ryan, I'll just leave it this here because I've been thinking a lot about it, is Matt Campbell said yesterday when I was watching Rocco Beck's film, I kept putting up Brock Purdy's film. And this is lessons learned, right? So we talked yesterday about lessons learned by a coach, and can you fall in love with a scrappy gamer and not actually go get the guy with the talent that is also going to have those mental abilities? And are you indexing for Brock Purdy too much, and everybody who looks like Brock Purdy isn't going to turn into Brock Purdy? He knows better than me what he's actually looking at and what he actually wants. But that would be my concern, is that, okay, we think everyone is Brock Purdy, and that is hard to do.
Yes. They do the same thing with Breece Hall, too, and Montgomery. That's a trend that I've noticed as well. And so that's good and bad, right? We'll find out. Well, what is a lot of Bo Prabula, but a better, at least from what I've seen,
he's a better passer.
Not as risky. Yeah. Better passer.
He's a better passer overall from the neck up. And Bo never wanted to give up on a play. Like, he just would throw the ball into whatever coverage. And
there's a lot of that.
I think one of the biggest problem.
Yeah. So mine was let's see, what did I give? C+. Probably could be a B-. C+ might be a little hard on it. It's just Will looks like a lot of the quarterbacks I've seen. I like a lot of what I've seen there. To me, a B+ to an A is a difference maker, right? But we've seen a lot of difference maker 4-star quarterbacks not pan out a ton, and we've seen a lot of guys in Will Wood's shoes be excellent. So yeah, I really don't have a too hard of an opinion on quarterback, and I really did. I understand why they didn't go after Peter Bork at the end. Speaking of Peter Bork, was another one. Is like trying to find reasons not to come to Penn State. That's how that felt. So I wasn't, and I think the staff felt the same way. Truly, yeah. Which is Matt Campbell seemed to be very high on Will Wood. The feedback I constantly got was Will Wood. Matt Campbell loves Will Wood, and where it felt more like not saying the Jake Waters and Mauser were more over here than others. It just felt like there was a steady progression of that flow. So I think Will Wood has a lot of excellent traits. He looks like a great college quarterback to me. And look, we do rankings based off the NFL draft, right? That's kind of how it works. And so, it makes a lot of sense. Could he come in here and be an excellent quarterback? Absolutely. I feel the same thing about James Armstrong as well. So
I put all this in his film evaluation originally, but I think the best way for me to say it is I have a high confidence that Will Wood is going to look like he looks on film now once he gets to the college level. Good or bad. Like, I think he's going to be consistent because the things that he does well all translate. Peter Bork, there is a higher variance of, is he going to be that guy at the college level? But there's also the variance of upside, and that's what you're pricing into this. So like Will Wood, you're right. The things he does on film, I am incredibly impressed. There's nothing you can critique really about his film. Like, he's he averaged 16 yards of completion. Like, it's insane. One interception, I think, and ran the ball well. Anyway, So those are all grades. I put the link in to both the articles, offense and defense, in the description of the video if you want to go read more. But Ryan, any final thoughts as we get out of here?
No, I got to run because I'm getting a very important call, and now that person's calling me for a second time, and I really need to take this call. So, yeah.
All right.
We're good.
Ryan, thank you so much. Appreciate the overtime you gave here. We'll be back next week with camp. Starts on Wednesday. We'll get access later than that, but we'll be talking about Penn State football, doing the football thing coming up in just a little bit. For Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz, Greg Pickle, and Nate Bauer, we'll talk to you later.